Hello and welcome to the D2C podcast. I'm Eric Dick. Today's focus shifts from the flashy world of marketing to the critical yet often overlooked realm of product creation and supply chain management. In this episode, we delve deep with our guest, Eran Mizrahi from Ingredient Brothers, who brings a wealth of experience from his remarkable journey in the food and ingredient industry. From his early days in South Africa to pivotal roles at companies like Plated.com and Nuts.com, Eran's path has been anything but conventional. His unique insights into the intricacies of sourcing, logistics, and the challenges of starting and scaling in the CPG space offer invaluable lessons, whether it's discussing the nuances of ingredient selection, the importance of efficiency of supply chain, or the art of balancing cost and quality. This episode is packed with practical wisdom for entrepreneurs and seasoned business professionals alike. Join us as we explore the behind-the-scenes world that shapes the products we love with the stories and strategies from a master of the trade. Hope you enjoy it. On with the show.
Don't sacrifice on tastes. The simplest thing, the biggest thing is that the product's got to taste good. It's got to be objectively good, if not better than what's out there. There's so many amazing products that have all these adaptogens and things in it, and then you taste it and it separates, or it's gritty, or it doesn't taste good, it's not seasoned well. As a founder, it's really easy to believe in what you're doing so much that you believe that everyone at mass market will just act like your early adopters. People will come once because it sounds interesting, sounds good, sounds healthy. They're not going to buy again if it didn't taste good, right? We're still humans, and founders shouldn't forget about that. Great tasting products go a long way in selling your dream.
If you haven't yet used Motion, the creative analytics platform used by top e-com and D2C brands like Fiore, True Classic, The Farmer's Dog, Hexclad, and hundreds more to ship winning ads, here's why you should try it out. Everyone knows that the right creative is the number one lever for success with paid ads. That's how you make money. But consistently shipping new winning creative, you're going to need your media buyers and your creative teams on the same page. Right now, you're probably spending hours tiring away going back and forth between Google Sheets and your ad platforms and tools, and then spending even more time plugging it all into different decks for the rest of your team. In a perfect world, you could have an elegant way to combine visual assets and performance data so media buyers can save time and creative teams can get the details they need to make great ads all in one place. And that's where Motion comes in. In seconds, you can build powerful visual reports using data from your ad accounts. You can monitor your performance metrics and see your visual assets in the same platform. No need to go back and forth across multiple apps. You'll finally have media buyers and creative teams working together to create and scale your next big winner. If you're ready to learn how the best D2C and e-commerce brands use Motion to ship winning Meta, TikTok, and YouTube ads, book a demo today or start a free trial at motionapp.com/DTC. Even better, Motion offers a monthly subscription plan so you can dodge those annoying annual contracts. Get 50% off your first month when you use the link motionapp.com/DTC on sign up. Welcome to the D2C podcast, Eran. I have been talking to a lot of CPG advertisers or brands on this podcast specifically, and we always come at it from the Pilot House side as a marketing company. We always talk about how to move these products and grow them. But I think it's great to have you on this podcast to chat a little bit about what goes into making products, what goes into the supply chain. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Eric. I think the marketing side is definitely the sexy front end of everything. And hopefully you don't hear too much about supply chain because it means we're doing our job. But it is, an important part of telling a story and being able to develop a product and scale the product too, right? You can say a lot of things, but if you can't do those things at scale, then it doesn't really matter. And so, excited to chat about how those two things mesh with each other.
Let's start with the Ingredient Brothers origin story. Let's just hear about how the business came together.
Yeah. So, I was born in South Africa. I came to the US 10 years ago for graduate school and had always been interested in entrepreneurship, had always been interested in food, and landed up after business school, taking a detour. I was at Deloitte before and landed up at a meal kit company, which was called Plated.com. It was sold to Albertsons in 2017. And I helped, build a lot of their sourcing and planning tools and really, started, the product was food. And so we're working a lot with the culinary team on product development and finding, new great products. And from that moment saw, even then that the B2B ingredient space was quite inefficient and that there was really hard to get information. It took a lot of resources to get information. And so, that was something that stood out to me. And then I moved to a company called nuts.com, which is an amazing family business in New Jersey, selling about 3,000 products from all over the world. And there again, uncovered, started to, when you start to ask questions, uncover a lot of value, uncover a lot of information. And nuts.com is a really large and established business. And so it was also surprising to me that, even for a company that big, they struggle sometimes to get all the information they need. And so, I continued to see this pattern and felt like, oh, wow, smaller businesses, if they don't have the resources at all, then they're not getting any information, right? It's really hard. And so in 2021, called up a former employee of mine on my way home from work and said, hey, I've got this wild idea. Do you want to come and join me? And took about a few weeks of convincing and a very loose business plan. And we quit our jobs and started Ingredient Brothers with, very simple, trying to just do better, right, for our customers, right? And that's like our mantra, is how we live every day. And so it's taking something that exists already and just try and do it a little bit better.
Do you think it's funny? This is a theme I see when you've got sort of legacy manufacturers. It's just they're just not set up for the D2C world in a way, right? They're used to dealing with huge conglomerates that order sort of indiscriminately or a little bit more indiscriminately, whereas this whole D2C movement, arming the rebels that Shopify has helped do, it just sort of like people are buying smaller quantities. They need more information. They need to be more nimble, and these big manufacturers just aren't set up to do that. Is that what you find?
I think it is. I think a lot of it comes down to just the cost to be able to do that is really high, right? And so, we're not perfect at that yet, right? We're working towards it. The cost of being able to serve smaller customers is quite high, and a lot of that is because people haven't embraced technology as much. There's a lot of information needed to service every customer. Every customer is slightly different feel, right? There's so many different nuances to food. You think you're selling the same coconut milk, and then you realize, no, they need something a little bit different, right? And so I think a lot of what these bigger operations is that they are built, yes, for customers that are big, have large scale, and they're, in my opinion, not as great as collecting all the inputs that they need, the information. They're not as efficient, and being able to service that to their customer. And so what that lands up doing is making a transaction with a smaller player very expensive and actually not worth it to a large extent. So we're trying over time. We're not there, like I said. We're baby steps. But that's what we're trying to solve, right? Is like, how do we make it easy for every size to get access to the same information, right? And it sounds so simple, right? It's just, collect the data and present it in an easy way and make it accessible to the right person at the right time. But it's, there are many different inputs when it comes to ingredients and supply chain.
One of the big headaches that came across in a recent interview I did was someone talking about, like, when you buy hot dogs, you buy them in packs of 12, but then the buns come in packs of 16. And when you're building a CPG product or a food product, you're combining things like that all over the place, where you have to buy different quantities of different things. And I'm sure that's always going to be the case to some degree. What are some of the other like big headaches that you find your customers have in terms of supply chain?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example, and it makes planning really hard. I think the other thing is like logistics, right? Obviously shipping is especially at a startup stage, is really expensive, and when you're shipping less than full truckloads, it becomes even more expensive. And so the ability to consolidate goods and ship them all in one full truck, or consolidate suppliers, like find one supplier who can do all of it so that you can ship a full truckload of things to your end customer. I think that is a huge burden on startups and makes their cost skyrocket compared to, let's say, a more established player. I think the other thing is that they have to work with so many different suppliers. And that's really tough, is that, every supplier has their own onboarding forms. You have your onboarding forms. There's compliance, there's follow-up on compliance. And so, working with so many partners, and then, each partner having, their own process, as well as all the compliance that goes into it. And I think that's the other thing, is that for a small company, managing all the compliance and having to do more of a, I need this, versus the supplier saying, here's everything you need, which is typically what happens. I think that also just adds to it. So, it's a big burden on, startups and founders in the CPG space.
I just was listening to a podcast the other day, and they said that an entrepreneur's superpower is just like ignorance of not knowing how hard it's going to be once you start throwing all these balls in the air that you got to juggle.
Yeah. And you always think that, like, once you solve this problem, it's going to be easy. And then you realize that you solve the problem and 10 more exist. Or once you make this hire, we're going to be able to scale even faster. And then you hire the person, you just realize all the 50 things you weren't doing that you should have been doing. And now you still need another person, right? So yeah, I see that. I see that a lot in even in my own experience at, scaling Ingredient Brothers.
How active of a partner are you in terms of like the financial, like the actual financials that go into a product? Because I imagine when you want to build your pet CPG brand, you probably want the best of everything. You're going to want the exotic fruits. You're going to want to put it all together, but you've got to find something that is going to back out for you long term, and
Yeah.
that's going to be. So how do you give me? So say I'm a CPG brand who's come to you. I've got a very ambitious plan. Like what's the spiel I get from Ingredient
Yeah, I
Brothers?
mean, I think that's a great point and something I have a strong opinion of, and because I've seen it play out in multiple different ways. I think, when founders come to us, and usually they're coming with like a bill of materials, right? They're making a product, or they want to launch a product, and they want to go through the ingredients that they're looking to use, whether we supply them or not. Like, we'll work through it. And the first thing I try and understand is like, what is the vision for this business? Are you trying to build a niche premium product where, you're trying to capture some small percentage of the market that has a huge willingness to pay and is, wants access to really premium ingredients? And the other side is, are you looking to scale and become mass, right? And do you have ambitions to become mass? And like, those are two very quick distinctions. And then once, usually what they say is they want to go mass, then you start to look at the ingredients and you try and identify like, where is the differentiation within these ingredients that actually are important to the final product? And where are we adding ingredients in that I can push back on and say, hey, this doesn't have a lot of supply. You're paying a massive premium. There isn't really going to be access to efficiency as you scale. And is it really going to add to your, finished product? And try and identify with the founder, like, what is important to them? What are the claims that they want to make? Because yeah, in the end of the day, you need to make a product that makes margin for everyone, right? All stakeholders in the supply chain. And so understanding that from the get-go, I think, is really important, so that you can balance being able to claim everything with being able to claim the most important things, and still do that at scale at good margins, right? And I think that it's a struggle, because when you develop a product, it's really easy, right? Like, it's like you just keep adding features, right? Like a software engineer.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I can make it high protein, and I can make it like using natural ingredients, and I can do this, and I can make the flavor taste of me. And I think that, that's where you get into a dangerous corner.
And then when it comes to regulations, are those ingredient specific and ultimately end product specific as well? Or like, how do you, because I imagine as you add more and more complexity to a product, you also potentially add more regulatory complexity.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, there's a lot of push in different directions for claims that people want to make. So you have your, more mainstream claims, like your organic claim, your gluten-free claim. You're now getting, you've got your vegan claim, your non-GMO claim, and then you've got kosher, halal. And so you've got, even before you get started, likely you got 5 or 6 different certifications that you're going to want to have, or at least know that your product can, adhere to those certifications. And then you've got all these newer claims and others that people are looking for, like fair trade, or you've got
Carbon
plant-based,
neutral
or
or
carbon neutral or upcycled. And so you have a lot of room to, expand into different claims. Again, I think it comes down to, what is the customer looking for, and how do you balance all of that with, with the claims that you're trying to make? Because everything has there is a cost to doing all of this stuff, and you don't want to stretch yourselves too much and trying to, say everything, but, try and say the most important things. And it's not a bad thing to have an ambitious claim or an ambitious goal to do something, even with a supply chain that isn't fully built out. Just don't have 10 ingredients that have that, right? Because then I
yeah.
think we're going to get into trouble.
So when you're sort of sourcing suppliers for your clients, when you are looking at new suppliers, what are the green flags? What are you looking for in your supply partners? And I want to know what the red flags are as well.
Yeah, so I think obviously number one is communication, right? Similar to what probably everyone else is looking for in us, right? Which is communication. Like, is this person going to be there when something goes wrong, right? And that's like the barrier to entry for us, is like, they need to be good at communicating and good, like, look like they're going to be good partners. And then you go into, the nitty gritty of both. If it's a new product, we'll do an analysis on that product and what is the risk assessment of that product, and what are some of the risk characteristics of what do people find in certain ingredients. Have there been pesticide claims, or so different residue or foreign objects that you normally find that we need to now mitigate against, or understand how our vendor's mitigating against? And then we go and look at the vendor. And so we do, I would say there's like 2 different angles that we look at the vendor. The one is like from a compliance standpoint, in that we take a very serious look at compliance, all the history of compliance, as well as all their audit reports, and really try and break down are they doing things the right way? And has someone come in and validated those checks, right? And have those controls? And where do we not feel comfortable and need more information? And then the other side is on capacity and pricing and negotiating power and on SLAs, right, for service. And so I think there's like the business side of things that we try and make sure, like, is this a partner that's got continuity? Are they going to go out of business? Has there been any recalls? Like, what are the things that, we need to look out for from a business perspective? And then there's the compliance stuff, which I think, our customers rely on us for a lot, and making sure that they're, they check all the boxes on that side.
And I guess just on the same token, are there any, I guess not being able to do those things are the red flags. Are there any other red flags to look out for when maybe they check the boxes on those things, but maybe there's other things?
I mean, when it sounds too good to be true, it usually is, right? So if the cost is too low and the product seems too good and the sample seems too good and everything lines up, I would just be very careful because, in supply chain, nothing is perfect. Everything kind of is a little bit rigidy and and rough around the edges. So just be careful. Sometimes it sounds too good to be true. So then I would even double down and making sure that like what they're saying is what you're actually going to get. And then there is a lot of third-party data out there on the FDA. If there's been any alerts on that vendor or anything that they've been like red flagged on, that I think you should look out for. And we try and look for vendors that have been in business a long time that have good references, and we don't want to be the first. We're a startup, so we're definitely not trying to work with someone who this is their first time ever exporting things. And so we try and find vendors who have a really good track record, have exported a consistent amount of product into the US, and have met quality standards.
So it's funny. I think I heard the other day that the bartenders make most of their money from vodka. Vodka is like the thing that they just sell the most at most bars. Maybe that's in the States. I don't know, maybe in Russia. I don't know. But I'm curious, what's your vodka? Like, what's the ingredients that are it's funny. My dad actually sold food additives as well, but he sold like chemical food additives, which were like citric acid and sodium benzoate and all these things. But I'm curious, like what's the staple? What do you sell most of?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because it does feel like there's an infinite number of ingredients, but when you look at the market, there really isn't, right? Like, I think there's certain things that are just show up all the time, especially when it's imported. So, if I go to our staple categories, like coconut-based products are, there's a lot of growth in the use of coconut-based products. You've obviously got your coconut oils, your coconut milks, things like that have been used for a long time, but continue to be used as plant-based products, continue to grow in popularity. Spices, right? Spices, there's just a tremendous amount of imported spices into the US. You've got garlic, onion, chilies, and everything else in between. So we do a lot of spices. And then you've got seeds. A lot of the seeds are grown, like a lot of nuts are grown within the US, right? So US big grow of nuts. And a lot of the seeds, like chia seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, those things come from outside. And so we do a lot of business in that.
What's the most exotic ingredient you've ever procured?
The most exotic ingredient. Wow, it's an interesting question. Or the weirdest ingredient. I mean, I think the one interesting ingredient that we procured that didn't land up having the momentum that we thought it was a nut out of the Philippines called the pili nut. Really nutritious, really great product. Just very expensive and has a low shelf life for a nut. And so there just wasn't that fit. But we really believed in it. It's a great product. It just the local market there drums up the price a lot, and so exporting is really expensive.
Interesting. So, everyone's mind right now, well, it's Q4, so everyone's mind is on scaling and making as many sales as possible. But at the same time, everyone's looking to cut costs given some of the strains in the economy. So what are some of the ways that you see smart companies bringing down costs in their supply chain to optimize margins?
Yeah, I think, again, it comes down to focus and priorities, right? So, the number one thing is know where your costs are. I've seen a lot of people save money, and then when you go and look at the usage of that ingredient, it's like 5% of their total usage. And so it doesn't actually make a big dent. So the number one thing I've seen on the other side of the table is making sure that you have a focused approach towards where you're looking to save money, right? And which commodities you're looking, or which ingredients you're looking to cut costs on. And then it's about running a diligent process on that, right? And trying to understand, what does the market landscape look like? Who are the other suppliers or manufacturers in the space? Trying to figure out like what, the onboarding process of those ingredients would look like, so that you could run an RFP or a bidding process, or at least get alternative quotes so you have negotiating power. And generally, especially if you're a startup, you're going to be paying more than what you will pay at scale. That's the nature of the beast, right? Because that's, I'd say, like, again, come back to like the cost of service is a lot higher. And so as you scale, understanding that what are those inflection points that will give you access to different suppliers, that will give you access to better pricing, and then slowly starting to gather data, right? Save every quote you have in a spreadsheet. That's the one piece of advice I have, is that a lot of times those prices get lost in emails, and you're like, you don't have pattern and you don't have data. So then, I think then you land up like having to go back and refresh. But we do a good job of saving all of our supplies data. I would do the same with our data, and make sure you're saving it so that you can see how the markets are reacting and what's going on, so that you can slowly start to get access to better pricing.
And I saw a post that you made online a little bit about like margin busting ingredients, because I think of like a supermarket or a product line. There's probably some products that are higher margin than others. There's loss leaders in the case of the supermarket, but that process that you were talking about really determining what needs to be in your product, you kind of have to think about each ingredient in terms of its margin as well. If it's a lower margin thing, then it better be doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the claims or the marketing, right?
Correct. Yeah. I think again, like, the more niche the product is, the harder it is to come by, the more margin likely the supplier will put on it. And then you've got your more, let's say, commoditized ingredients that, it's a lot easier to get to price parity and pay what everyone else in the market is paying. And there's enough supply. So you've got, the pricing isn't too high relative to the value that it gives. So, I think definitely identifying your bill of materials from a margin perspective. If you have a product in there that's not driving any value to the consumer and is taking up a significant amount of your costs, you should look into it. And then on the flip side, thinking about, I love to give examples of how do you take normal everyday products that are good margin, where you can be competitive on price, and add an ingredient that just changes up the brand a little bit and gives it something that gives you a position in the market. Now, I'm going to give a bad example because I'm not a marketer, but if you take a jar of peanut butter, right, and so peanuts are relatively cheap, processing of peanut butter is relatively standard, and you can likely get to economies of scale quickly. How do you take that peanut butter and add something that is not so expensive but gives you a twist? So if you add flax seeds, or if you add chia seeds, or if you add something else that has a pull, you can make a claim on it, or at least talk about, but isn't going to drive up your costs. Let's say that if you were to make peanut butter out of peanuts found on the top of Mount Everest, and that definitely would change things up a little bit, and maybe not be as beneficial to the consumer as you think.
I think about I think about midday squares and their sort of concept, like to take what you've said even a step further, of just like creating a product that shifts expectations or whatever, that goes in a new spot of the supermarket, like they did have a refrigerated product, which I'm sure if you came to, I don't know if you work with them, but I bet if they came to you early, because I guess you have to balance your ambition with with your vision, because I bet that business cost a lot to get started, to have to sort of reinvent a new category of food.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I think I'm always going to be the contrarian and, push back on everything, because that's my nature. Supply chain, it's cost, efficiency. And I think that's where like a founder has to take that and understand that, and then understand where they need to double down and say, no, I have conviction that doing a refrigerated product, and pushing on that part of the supply chain is going to give us a differentiated product, and that's why we'll win in the market. But I think if you look at like midday squares, and I could be incorrect, but I feel like most of the ingredients are pretty well-known ingredients and are available. And so I think that even though, yes, they've done something in one aspect a little bit, different from everyone else from a supply chain perspective, from other aspects have been relatively standard, and that's allowed them to focus on the thing that differentiates them.
I also think of a guy I had on the podcast, I'd love to have him on again soon, is Mike Fata, who sort of took, I forget what they were called before, but he basically, I think another company did it, but he ended up trademarking it, but he changed the name of the product from whatever it was to Hemp Hearts. And that just got this. I remember when my mom in the 90s came to me and was like, we should be eating hemp hearts because it sounds good. It's, and so I imagine there's the spin on individual ingredients and the spin on individual products is, so I'm wondering, are there any, like what's hot right now? Are there any of these like big trends in ingredients in terms of hemp hearts, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think hemp is still growing, and we get a lot of requests for hemp, and see a lot of buzz around the hemp space. I think taking allergens out of food is still a big thing. So using cassava and different, making like a gluten-free, allergen-free products. I think we're still seeing that play out a lot, and we're still continue to get a lot of requests for those. And then there's always a push for adding like freeze-dried ingredients versus spray-dried products, and like that again, I continue to see like reducing the ingredient label, right? So like a normal spray dried product will have maltodextrin and other fillers maybe potentially in the processing, and then freeze dried product will have, only the single ingredients, and so you're getting, just the goodness of the product without the moisture. And so I think I still, we continue to see that, like, how do we reduce the label? How do we reduce the label? How do we reduce the label as much as we can with, keeping the efficacy of the product, the taste of the product, and, the shelf life of the product.
I think of those RX bars that just say like nuts, chocolate,
Yeah.
egg whites, right? And I think that's a really cool a cool trend.
Yeah, agreed. If you don't understand the label, then you should look again, right? So it's
And you almost never do when you get down there.
yeah.
Are there any ingredients you won't source? Like, I guess you're probably not sourcing as many of the chemical, like the things my dad sold, the citric acid, all those industrial flavor
Yeah,
enhancers,
we're not. I mean, we get a little bit. We've done a few
emulsifiers.
additives and things like that. I mean, I think, we haven't come across anything that we have strong conviction against. I think, again, like, we partner with brands that we believe in, we partner with companies that we believe in, and we try and source as ethically as possible, and and provide great quality products. Everything in moderation, right? So I can't, it's really hard to know where to draw the line on what to source or what not to source. I think I haven't come across something that we've said no to. I'm sure there will be, right? From a standpoint of, like, we don't feel good about sourcing this, but, at the moment, like, most of the people we work with are, natural food companies who are doing great things and are pushing the envelope. And so we're happy doing that. And so thankfully we haven't had to say no yet.
Have you ever thought about up the product side? Like, you see all these different products being created, you're kind of behind the scenes on them. Have you launched a product or ever thought about launching a product?
I mean, I worked in consumer for a number of years with Plated and Nuts.com. It's crossed my mind. Like, I see opportunity in random places, and with ingredients. I think we'll start with, we do some private label now with brands and that are doing private label, and we try and push our innovation to them. And that's where I see opportunity for us as we scale, is to try and, leverage other people's brands to get our product on shelf. We're not marketers. We're not direct to consumer marketers. I know the depth on the bench that you need to make that successful, and the capital. So for now, like, I think we'll stick to wholesale ingredients and try and at least push that innovation towards our customers, and tell them what we're seeing in the market.
And so inflation is, I think it's leveled off, but it's still it still compounds. That's the way time works. But is it just as apparent, or even more apparent, in the individual ingredient space? Is it something you're feeling?
I think, it's interesting because I was expecting it to slow down a lot quicker than it has, based on what we've seen. The biggest driver for us in 2021 was shipping costs, right? You're paying $20,000 for a container out of China, and now those prices have gone down dramatically, and you're starting to see those things come down to 2019 levels. And then your commodity prices seem to have like leveled off in certain places. The dollar is obviously really strong, and so there's good purchasing power. Unfortunately, that's also meant that a lot of local producers, like a lot of the nut farmers, have suffered because the dollar is so strong and demand has dropped, which means that their pricing has also dropped, and so you're seeing, a drop there. So I'm surprised that, I guess I don't know how much food makes up of the basket of goods, but I do think that we'll start to, especially going into 2024, see a bit of a slowdown or a decrease, in inflation from a food perspective. And then, the other thing is just, there is always going to be war or, bad crops or weather patterns that will influence one or two commodities a year. And so, it's hard to predict whether, it will be chia seeds next year or pumpkin seeds that something happens and drives up the price. But I would say that's not an inflationary environment. That's just the natural pattern of ingredients around the world.
I think we have a lot of people on the pod who listen to the podcast who aspire to create brands, as well as a lot that already have them. And I think there's probably a lot who think about CPG brands. You've mentioned, keeping a spreadsheet of your prices. I think that's super good. Just being very conscious about the ingredients going in. What any other sort of final words that you'd give to people out there looking to start a CPG brand?
The biggest thing that I would say is the network of, people are open and want to share in the space. The food industry is so big that I think there's not a sense of competition as much as maybe in some other industries or in some other countries. And so my advice would be to open up and try and speak to as many people further down the supply chain as you can, right? If some of your ingredients are coming from China, those people will speak to you and they'll have conversations, right? And so try and at least open yourself up to a lot of conversations early on to really understand the ingredient deck that you're trying to go forward with, and finding the right partners, even though they may not be the right partners for now. So many people will take conversations. And as long as you're asking interesting questions and trying to, extract information, I think people will be willing to talk. And that allows you to have perspective on how to develop the product and how to scale the product. Because what you don't want to do is get to like an amazing burst of momentum and then find that you can't scale because no co-man will do this, or the amount of supply is not available, or some other barrier that slows down your growth. And so I think it's have the conversations, ask the right questions, but try and go as far deep into the supply chain as possible. And probably the biggest thing to remember, the simplest thing, but the biggest thing, is that the product's got to taste good, and it's got to be objectively good, if not better than what's out there. There's so many amazing products that have all these adaptogens and things in it, and then you taste it and it separates, or it's gritty, or it doesn't taste good, it's not seasoned well. And I think in the end of the day, like as a founder, it's really easy to, believe in what you're doing so much that you believe that everyone at mass market will just act like your early adopters. And if you're trying to build a niche product, that could work. But I think at the end of the day, if you look at some of the products that have done really well, like even Athletic Greens is a great example, where the product's got to be good. It's got to stand out. And I think it's got to taste really good. And so don't sacrifice on taste, because people will come once because it sounds interesting, sounds good, sounds healthy. They're not going to buy again if it didn't taste good, right? We're still humans and we are driven by taste. And so I think founders shouldn't forget about that. I think great tasting products go a long way in selling your dream.
How does it work with supply chain companies like yours? Do you work with mainly new companies who are bringing new products to market, or are there situations where there's brands that have an existing supply chain and then you bolt on and change the whole supply chain, or change pieces of it? Like, how does that process work when someone comes to work with you?
Yeah, so I thought it was going to be the former, and we're going to be working mainly with smaller players. What I found is that two startups working together sometimes is difficult because we don't have leverage to help the startup. And so most of our customers are fairly large brands in the US that are using our ingredient either as a private label product, or they're putting it into manufacturing, repackaging, in some format. And we come in and either they're launching a new product, and so we're building out a new supply chain for them and being a partner that way, or they're not happy, or they're trying to gain access to better pricing, or try to rethink the way things are sourced. And so a lot of what we do is we have a fairly large team with a lot of resources, and so we can really spend the time working with these brands to identify what the supply chain should look like, what are the supplier characteristics should be, and how do they get access to good pricing, right, and be fair pricing. And then again, like what we try and strive on is the service. It's I think price, everyone can get to parity very quickly at scale, and what you should be paying. And then it's really about all the things around the process that make us valuable to the end customer.
Very cool. Well, go check out ingredientbrothers.com if you're looking to optimize your supply chain or build one out. Anywhere else you'd want people to look you up?
I mean, we're very active on LinkedIn, so come and check us out, or ingredientbrothers.com.
LinkedIn is the hack, right? That's where you'll find a lot of different people. I was just talking with someone who's building a CPG brand, and it's not only should you be talking to all your people on the supply chain, talking to getting all contacts and conversations, just talk with other entrepreneurs, other CPG entrepreneurs. They're also just as open, and they've gone through so many of the challenges that you have in all likelihood, right?
Yeah, exactly. I built a very good network via LinkedIn, just cold messaging people and asking for advice for a call, and it's been really, really amazing to see how helpful people are and open they are to having conversations and seeing how they can be helpful.
Nice. Well, thanks for coming on. You'll have to be our resident ingredient guy.
Thanks so much, Eric.
And I'll know where to go when I'm ready to launch and scale my CPG brand.
I can tell you a few ideas after the show.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can do that right now at direct-to-consumer, all one word, .co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.